To me, I look at comedy as like the last true free speech zone. I mean, people get offended by anything these days, right?
When I was doing stand-up comedy, the comedians that I admired or looked up to, they can be very funny going against that. And there wasn't an army online to attack or to quote unquote cancel them. They were just plowing through because they had the microphone and they were saying things that people considered funny. Now, if someone says something that's funny and then there's a group of people saying that's actually offensive and they're loud enough, they might convince others that thought it was funny to think it's offensive now. So maybe it's taboo. And I think that's kind of what's happening.
Not everybody could get away with that. He's Chappelle, right? He's already achieved kind of like social status and all of those good things. And he's utilized his platform to explore views that may be sensitive in nature and then draw a different light to it to bring attention to how ridiculous some perspectives are or how hardwired certain people are. And I think that softens the blow for something as serious as the social issues that we have today.
All right. Today's guest has been someone who's been very tough to lock down. We've been trying to get him on the show for several months, but we finally made it happen. So he's the kind of guy who walks into a room and immediately changes the vibe. We're talking about someone who's not just making people laugh, he's building a whole business around it. Manny Garavito. He's the brain behind MiamiComedy.com, a guy who's turned comedy into an art form and a lifestyle. Whether it's coaching people to find their unique humor or helping comics create content that actually lands. Manny's the guy. He's even got a virtual comedy club, a podcast, and he was featured in this is something that I discovered recently. He was featured in the Amazon Prime documentary called Respect the Light. So let's do this. Manny, welcome. We made it happen.
Yeah. Also, another title is Podcast Diva, apparently. I didn't know you guys worked hard to get me on here. I appreciate it. I thought it was just the meeting that went through the cracks, but I'm glad that you invited me again, because when I was looking at a couple of podcast episodes you guys were doing and how much variety it has and substance and value, I really am grateful that you guys reached out again. Thanks for having me.
No, we're happy to have you on board. I want to start off by talking about the hustle, right? The comedy hustle. So let's kick it off. I mean, you've built this crazy comedy empire, right? Miami Comedy. It's more than just jokes, right? So you're coaching, you're creating content, you're building a brand. It's like running a startup, but instead of apps or tech, you're selling laughs, right? So how did you go from being, a funny guy to building an entire comedy ecosystem in Miami?
Well, I didn't start off funny. It took me a while to understand how funny works. Let's just say I was someone that was trying to be funny, wasn't, but continued until he figured something out. And one of the things that I figured out was I'm not going to wait around for the opportunity of being on television or getting into the big clubs. I figured I might as well start a business and not wait for opportunity to knock, but rather create it with comedy. And so in Miami, our city was desolate when it came to having an industry or at least some sort of local community for comedy. It's a very nightlife party oriented city. And I thought there was an opportunity to build value in sharing, a night out of laughter for anybody in the city. And so I started MiamiComedy.com. I learned marketing. I learned how to create content, start a newsletter. And over the years, I just built a community. I helped comedians get good in our city. And in turn, it made me get good as a comedian because I saw it in a more meta way. And I realized that humor is a product and service on its own. People want to be entertained. People want to have a laugh. They want to go out with their friends and family. They want an excuse to go out on a Tuesday night for a drink. And if they can be entertained and enjoy themselves, you can build something amazing with comedy.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's like, people see a joke, right? And they don't realize, they hear a joke, they laugh. They don't realize the whole back end system that you would have to build, right? It's not just about being funny, it's about, engineering, maybe engineering humor to a certain extent, right? I mean, and then there's the whole hustle behind it. The pandemic changed a lot of things, right? But you've taken it a step further with the virtual comedy club, right? So most people think comedy, okay, it's all about, being in the room, right? Feeling the energy, reading the crowd. What made you think that, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna take this digital. Recreate how do you recreate that live energy online?
Well, you really can't. It's two different places to enjoy comedy, both virtually and in person. It's the same way you take in humor from a friend versus from a stranger. There's just different dynamics involved. What's very convenient about being a comedian virtually is that, and someone could be in line waiting for something, or on a couch bored, or waiting for someone to finish shopping for a purse, or frustrated, stuck in traffic, and they pull out their phone and they can get a quick hit of dopamine laughing at
Mhm.
something on their phone, something in their pocket. So to communicate something funny that way is convenient on its own.
Mm.
However, if on top of that you offer, hey, you should see me live. If you need a night out with your loved one, this is a bar or a comedy club that I'll be performing in. You should come out. And just by the bond or the connection people have through the content you've built or that you've shown them on your timeline, they want to see what it would be like to see you live. And I'm sure a lot of people that have followed comedians online that went to go see them live, it's a totally different experience. What you see online versus what you see on stage are two different shows. And it can be a very curious thing to see the difference between the two. And it allows us comedians to be a little more versatile in communicating what is funny. And it helps us build a really good fan base, a really good community of people that support our comedy because they can see us in a multifaceted, funny way.
Can we go somewhere for a second, Manny? Because I'm intrigued with Inception stories, and I know Dhiren as well, which is why he kind of is kind of like exploring the transition period, right? But there's kind of the glamour that we see of, like, stand-up comedians and stuff, but then they also are very transparent about the hustle nature of it and how hard it is to go from club to club, and how hard it is to just kind of get that pickup and the spotlight. And then for you to make that transition and then kind of take it upon yourself, which is also a very interesting entrepreneurial story, right? Because you're like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to find kind of my own platform and medium, and go about it my own way, using the currency of comedy to start your own business. That's a very fascinating inception. Could you dive into that a little bit more, and kind of like the hustle side, and that particular shift, and maybe it's a mindset shift, the way that we're kind of framing it up?
Well, my mind kind of goes in two directions when you ask that, Nikos. So the first one is, as an artist, how can you make a business out of art? That's a very interesting outlook. And most artists that do partake in this mindset can be very successful because your art is so unique to you. You got to find a way to connect it with others in a way that's not as, I'd say, traditional. So you got to be innovative in communicating why your art is valuable enough to be sold, or why should people care so much about it, outside of, like, let's say, a museum or a comedy club, or, some sort of exhibition, as to why your art should be out there. So there's the first one. You got to be an entrepreneur and communicate your art in a way that connects others into seeing the value behind it. And that's why you got to hustle, I guess, when you're an artist, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to show that. And the second thing is, just like any entrepreneur, you're trying to gain some sort of freedom or independence. And the less people you have between what you're selling towards the customer, the less people that are between that, the better you are at being an entrepreneur, in my opinion. because you don't have to wait for an opportunity to come around. Like I said before, you create them. So those two mindsets are the things that allowed me to get started in understanding how can I turn humor into a product or service that people can enjoy. So, and this can go in various ways for many artists. In my case, was when I first got started, was there's no comedy scene in Miami at the time, in '09. Very minimal rooms. I would have to drive hours to perform. You know, I would drive like 3 to 5 hours. I remember, to do just an open mic. It wasn't even necessarily a comedy show. It was just a bar in some retirement area. You go there, there's 5 people. I have to wait for my turn. I have to go on after someone that was doing poetry. You know, they're doing a very heartfelt love ensemble of words. And then there I go talking about dirty jokes and my experience and all these things. And it was tough, but it showed me the tenacity I have to follow this dream. And it woke me up to thinking, why am I driving so far to get good? And there's so many other cities out there. All you got to do is, go down an alley, go to some seedy bar down the street, go to someone's attic, someone's backyard. There's so many ways to do comedy in other cities. You can even go at 3 p.m. and do a show at some deli or behind a pizza shop, and there's like 2 or 3 people that will listen to your jokes as you polish them. And so I just had the vision through my tenacity of like, wouldn't it be great if Miami had that too? Mm-hmm. And as an artist, I just had to communicate it. And so how I communicated comedy, or how I marketed comedy in our city, was I didn't make it about me. I remember that was one of the big shifts that I had as an artist entrepreneur. I didn't say, this is my art, come see how funny I am. Look at me. Hey, funny guy at your place, come by. What I did instead was I gave them a reason that they can agree on. So do you need a laugh? Does Monday suck for you? Do you need a date night spot with your wife? Do you want to come out and enjoy a drink special and avoid all those expensive drinks? Well, I know a bar that comedians will be going up. I didn't even mention the comedians. I just said, come on out and check out the show. Enjoy a night out. Be adventurous. And when you start communicating like that, people are like, yeah, I do want to take my wife somewhere on a Wednesday that's affordable. I've never been to that bar. That bar looks fun. It's intimate. We got couches. And people just become intrigued by kind of just putting the story in their head of like, let's go see a comedy show at this cool bar that has affordable prices. And then they bring their wife, they bring their friends. They realize there's no show that night and it's a birthday. Why don't we go to this bar and see a comedy show for your birthday? And people kind of find different ways to appreciate a show. And so over time, I just built a newsletter, and now things like social media or a YouTube channel or podcast, to just build a bond with people that are looking for entertainment like that.
Yeah. So you saw a gap in the market. I think that was really the genesis of your entrepreneurial journey, right? You saw a gap that was not being served, or you saw an opportunity. You actually almost, you created the opportunity.
But most artists don't think that way, though, which is my observation from the earlier part of what you were mentioning, is that the irony is that you seem to be more money-minded than kind of your typical artist, because the typical artist, they'll live and breathe with their craft and not make a dime. They spend their entire lives giving things away and not thinking about the commercial vehicle through which this thing could make a living for them. They're just like, okay, I'm going to just keep doing spoken word, and then, maybe somebody will give me a donation or two, or go into my Patreon and do something. But it sounds like you were already looking at the bigger picture. You were like, there's a gap here. There is a market opportunity in Miami. I'm not seeing like a comedy scene and culture, so to speak. And not only that, but the legacy vehicle of how artists as comedians get paid, and just going from club to club and then building a business that way. That isn't it. There's an opportunity in the online world that you could take advantage of. So there was something definitely interesting of how that clicked for you and kind of came together.
Well, let's just say that mindset is the reason why I was able to meet people like Darren, people out there that are trying to make a difference. It wasn't always necessarily about the money. Of course, I wanted to make a living from comedy, but to I think to say that I do it for money wouldn't be as accurate as to say I think a city like Miami needs to laugh more. Well, when I started thinking like that, it has a little more passion involved. Where, let's say it's your final moments, you're in hospice or something, and you're like, I made Miami laugh every day. That feels good. I like that. And if you think like that now and what you can do, it's almost like you have so much value to give that there's no choice but to make money as a secondary thing. And that's how I like to think about, things like creating value, which I'm sure you guys touch on often. Everyone has the ability to create immense value. All you have to do is just shift from something trivial like money towards making a city laugh or inspiring other comedians how to make a living through your humor. And then, of course, you put a paywall somewhere in there, and then the money just trickles in. it finds its way to you because you're creating so much value.
Comedy has this really interesting way of bringing people together, right? I think that's what you saw, and you looked at it from the lens of a city, right? But it's not just about making people laugh. It's also about making them feel seen, right? It's almost like therapy, right? You almost laugh at your problems, right? And they somehow, when you laugh at your problems, they feel smaller. So do you look at comedy as a form of therapy? I mean, are people healing a little when they laugh, or when they see you on stage? Do they come up after the show and say, I feel a lot better. I was, I just went through a divorce or a bankruptcy, or all the challenges and issues that we face on the human journey. Like, do you hear that?
Sure. It's probably one of the best feelings ever to get feedback like that, or someone just sends you a DM and it's not even that long. Hey man, me and my girl are going through a breakup and this made me laugh. I really appreciate it. I was like, just a simple sentence like that is great, because when it comes to humor, I always say in my coaching, when it comes to humor, it's very human to appreciate and create humor. It's not a linear thing. It takes into account perspectives, emotions, the human experience. Like, in order for you to be funny, there needs to be an amalgamation of all these complex things that we have as humans. And for you to help someone just step out of their tunnel vision, look at the tunnel they're looking through from the side, and then laugh about it, that is magical, because it's not forced. They don't have to go to therapy or hire a coach or go through some big program to gain perspective. It's just instant. You said something with your words that tickled them, that made them look at a situation differently, and just have a laugh about it. Even if they result to going back into the tunnel, at least they saw what it was like outside of it for a brief moment. And it's a natural human reaction. It's in them to appreciate humor, whether it's from their own life, from the turmoil of societal issues or whatever. Just having a different perspective is very cathartic.
Yeah,
Comedy
I love that. It's almost like it's not just jokes. It's like you're giving them permission to let go.
That's good.
And
Yes,
that's powerful, right? That's really powerful. You mentioned coaching. So how does it work for someone who, I think humor, or being funny, is a great attribute for anyone to really have, right? Uh, are you born funny? Is it a muscle? I mean, can you work on it? Are people naturally more funny than others? Like, there are people who are listening to the show right now are probably thinking, no, you know what? I'm just not funny. Like, I'm not that guy. I'm not that person. I'm not that girl that
Or
can
even worse,
crack a joke.
people that think they're funny but they're actually not.
Yeah, there's that too. Can you speak to that? Like how do you, I know you're a comedy coach. How do you go through that process of helping someone find their the side the humorous side of them?
Sure. So being funny is different than being humorous. I think what the main difference is that a humorous person is able to see something in an entertaining way, or appreciate someone's ability to see something in an entertaining way, or like um, a smile in the mind, right? A person that's funny is, or someone that's, like, look at a stand-up comedian, like they do it as an art or as a profession. So they really double down in, things like performing on stage. A humorous person causes mirth, which is the ability to just enjoy something. Um, that there's that, and so you've met people that are very serious people, or that someone says something funny or amusing, and they don't appreciate it. So that would be someone that doesn't have a good sense of humor, because they can clearly see the person is trying to lighten the mood, and they're like, nope, not gonna let you. So that's kind of like the contrast. And I met those people all the time, and it's okay. And I never really doubt myself. And so one of the reasons why I got into coaching is not only because of our community, Dhiren, but it's also because I had a very difficult time in being a good stand-up comedian. But like I said, I had a lot of tenacity. I wanted to figure it out. I really enjoy comedy. And as a coach, I realized that everyone is humorous one way or another. Everyone has a part of their personality that can create mirth, that can make somebody's day, that can point something out, or be satirical about something, or have an observation that is like, oh my God, that's so true. And one of the ways to do that is, if you picture a time that you've made a friend or a family laugh, a family member laugh, or even yourself, like you just thought of something, you just chuckled to yourself while you're having lunch on your own. That is a voice that your personality naturally has. The question is, how can you transfer that from being someone like a friend or a family member, or even yourself, to a stranger or a social situation? I believe everyone has this ability. You just have to know it's there. You have to believe in it. You have to trust in it. You have to nurture it. You have to attempt to master it. As a comedy coach, I don't really think you can master your sense of humor, because it develops with you as long as you're aware of it. And it really comes down to simple things like labeling or detailing the things that make you laugh, or a comedian that you really enjoy. And you're saying, I like this show, or I like this movie because it had these things in it, or I love the way this person's face was in that scene. I love how outlandish it was. And you start labeling it, and then you can create some sort of understanding of how your sense of humor works just by giving it a title or saying it out loud. Because when you live your life, you can see an opportunity that reminds you of the things that make you laugh, and then you can point it out in your own way. So it's not really about giving you techniques on how to be funny or how to write funny things. It's more like understanding what you naturally laugh at and then translating it. That's a really good approach when it comes to coaching. Just understanding that it's already part of you.
Yeah.
Just can
Yeah,
use
this
it and how to
is
wield it.
this is giving me an interesting insight as I'm letting what you had mentioned land with me, in the distinction between being funny and being humorous. Because being funny, it's almost like, not to define it too much, but it's a little more superficial than just having a humorous nature and appreciating something more, and being entertained. And it's if you've ever taken an improv class, it's the yes and versus the yes but, right? You're like, and we know those vibe killers that they just refuse to look at something in a positive light. They're just like, no, and they'll think of all of the things that could potentially go wrong. And it's kind of, in essence, got that same thing to it, right? And then the other piece that kind of landed with me is being able to see something in a unique way, but then also unpacking kind of a universal truth that moves across different dimensions, which is much deeper than just, hey, that made me laugh. It's identifying something that's in all of us that you didn't look at before. And then I think of a Russell Peters or a Jokoi that's like making fun of absolutely every single culture, and then exacerbating that to a point where it's not, you know, cartoonish, but it's funny for that reason, right? And so people can relate to it, but you didn't see it in that light until they brought it there. So yeah, I appreciate what you're saying with just being humorous in general. So I'm definitely taking notes as you're mentioning these things. That's awesome.
Yeah, humor is a fun perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the person who basically refuses to, you know, get you to change the dynamic, right? So I mean, what's it like now as a comedian in this super hyper political, you know, reality that we're in right now, right? I mean, people get offended by anything these days, right? But comedy somehow cuts through that tension like nothing else. How do you, as a comedian, how do you navigate, or just for us, right, who don't do this for a living, how can we use comedy to navigate the world where everything is so politically charged, right? Like there are topics that we can't even touch anymore. Like, and are you touching? I mean, I know I asked a lot of questions there, but I'll stop there and you know, maybe you can just speak to that.
Well, I understand fully what you're trying to say. It's an interesting time because you can really breed good comedians and you can breed very mediocre ones through this landscape or this tension. I guess this collective tension we share in America. It's great because and I was talking about this recently. It's great because comedians can be a little more socially and emotionally intelligent with their jokes, which is good because then you can write really clever, witty comedy through this, or you can have a really good uh, diversity, or you could be more flexible as a comedian, or see how flexible you are as a comedian based on the landscape that we're in. Or you can be a comedian that panders and become mediocre and never really say anything that pushes the envelope. So it's interesting. Comedy right now, whether it's stand up, virtual, one liners, whatever, is very interesting now because the ones that really shine can fall in either of these two categories. When I first got started in comedy, there wasn't really much of a social media boom. There was social media, but it wasn't like a big factor in everyday life as it is now. And what social media is doing, at least in my opinion, is since it gives everyone a voice, people that have very extreme definitions or inclinations gather and then they point the finger at things that they don't agree with or they don't like. And then it gives them kind of power. When I was doing stand-up comedy, the comedians that I admired or looked up to, they can be very funny going against that. And there wasn't an army online to attack or to quote unquote cancel them. They were just plowing through because they had the microphone and they were saying things that people considered funny. Now, if someone says something that's funny and then there's a group of people saying that's actually offensive and they're loud enough, they might convince others that thought it was funny to think it's offensive now. So maybe it's taboo. And I think that's kind of what's happening. But if you are an adaptive comedian and you see that, you can then say to yourself, well, how do I make my point, make that funny? And even if people get offended by it, it can't be denied on how funny it is. So now it's no longer like you're causing the friction. Now it's just like you're being as you're having as much dexterity as you can with your joke writing or your delivery or how you say it or when you say it. So you got to be a little more emotional and socially intelligent with your humor or your comedy in order for it to go to the next level. So the way I see it is a good opportunity. This tension is good. People that have really good perspectives can really shine with this landscape.
From your perspective, should there be limits to that? Because in my opinion, you're on stage. If you don't get the context that you're a comedian and you're telling jokes, it's like why should you have to remind people that are paying tickets to do that? And yes, I do feel like you can definitely go over the edge. Matt Rife, I know, is experiencing some issues with this, but like, at what point do they not get a pass? Like, having, you being somebody on stage, like, are there actual limits, or is it just like, there's a delivery mechanism here that it's like, well, if it's artful and if it's good, then awesome. But that was offensive and it wasn't even a good joke, so no. Like, what's the line there? Are there some distinctions that can be drawn?
Like an unspoken rule.
I think all comedians at one point or another flub and either bomb or say something that they in their head was funny, but then when they say it, they're like, oh, wait a second, I can see why it wasn't. It's part of the process. Some comedians are better at avoiding it than others, of course, through experience, kind of got a better feel for it. I think if you can portray that you're socially and emotionally intelligent, even if you flub, I don't really think it'll affect you as much because you can either recover from it, you know, um, say something that'll show that you didn't mean it that way, even though it's taken out of context. I think the only way that you can really ruin your career is if Kramer, when he had that meltdown on stage, comes to mind. Do you guys see this? Do you guys know about that? Okay, so something like that will probably end your career because there was no social or emotional intelligence involved in that at all. They was just a meltdown. Like people can see right through the veil and see who you really are based on such an emotional moment. So I think that's really the only way to really ruin it. But if you say something that's taken out of context or something that was more offensive than funny, as long as people can tell that you're a good person, I think you'll be fine as a
Yeah. To me, I look at comedy as like the last true free speech zone, right?
Yeah.
Like it almost feels like you have a license because it's in the spirit of comedy. You can really push the boundary, and that's fun, right? When you're able to push the boundary and really, you know, maybe not alienate people. You don't want to do that, but at the same time, make them feel really uncomfortable. I hear a lot of comedians now. I've started paying attention when they drop a joke that gets gets people to react in a way wherein the comedian can tell that they're moving in their seat. He's like, oh, come on, you guys are sensitive, wait till what happens next. Like they're almost like building it up, building it up, building it up, and then it gets really like it really crosses the line.
Yeah.
Or
I,
yeah.
I, I love that example, Dhiren, because I think of, and I could think of two examples that are very different styles, but um, double downing on sensitive subjects. Chappelle is a master at this, right? Where he'll have like legitimate issues with somebody that he's offended, like at a show in the LGBTQ community, and then he'll talk about that story and then double down on it later. Not everybody could get away with that. He's Chappelle, right? He's already achieved kind of like a social status and all of those good things, and he's utilized his platform to explore views that may be sensitive in nature and then draw a different light to it to bring attention to how ridiculous some perspectives are or how hardwired certain people are. And I think that softens the blow for something as serious as the social issues that we have today. And then alternatively, another master of their craft that I'm thinking of is Russell Brand, right? He's the modern like Shakespearean, the way that he delivers kind of his lyrical tirades just on the fly in pure flow. And you could tell that these are not scripted at all, right? Like maybe he's just got like some talking points, but the way that he'll go off and massage a situation and articulate something is at a level of mastery that I just haven't seen before. So, talk to me about styles, Manny. Like, what styles? Like, if you're a person that's kind of trying to emulate these certain styles and you want to build a platform for either your brand or issues, or you want to talk about something to make an impact, like how do you start kind of disseminating and deconstructing certain styles that embody your own while being authentic to the message that you want to convey?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's loaded, but it's a great question. You're touching on, yeah, you're definitely touching on the art form and how it's portrayed. I mean, for me, I like satire because it shows the mirror. That's kind of like my style. I like a little observational, satirical angle when it comes to comedy. My niche in comedy is my city, so I like making fun of my city, but also showing how much I love it, and I love it so much that I want my city to see how it is, like, the nightlife of Miami, or how superficial we are, or how expensive things are. So that's kind of just one way to describe, I guess, the style. Another thing to mention is I like also the boundary pushing. I love that you can say a joke that makes people uncomfortable because it pushes their perspective in areas they're not known, that they don't know about, unknown territories, I guess, and that can be a really good thing and beneficial thing, if they take it that way, of course. I've shown the mirror to people, and they don't like what they see, and they get upset. I've upset some people. I mean, I try to do it as a friend, but sometimes it could be a little too on the nose. But it was just my way of like, hey, isn't it funny that you're like this? And they're like, how dare you? So there's that. Then there's another style to push the boundary, or to, I guess, deliver comedy is, and this is one thing that I've learned about the landscape today, especially in the comedy industry. I think charisma is a big one now. I think charisma is more important than the comedy itself, because if you look at Matt Rife or Russell Brand, they're very charismatic people. They know the social dynamics of any situation they're in, or they're good at asking questions, and they're good on yes-anding everything. And, some would say that they're very attractive. They have the halo effect. So the comedians I was brought up with, they weren't charismatic people, and that's what made them funny, because they were really good at just like being an authentic version of themselves, where they don't care if you like them or not. But now the landscape is like, oh, this guy is hilarious, but his or her joke writing isn't as good as someone else's, but they're so charismatic that it just amplifies whatever they say. I'm not saying necessarily these two comedians fall in that category, but the charisma definitely makes you hilarious. Like, you can say just about anything with the right tonality, the right body language, and people just appreciate and enjoy the delivery of it because of how likable they are. So I think in order for you to be a really good comedian is understanding how charisma works, because people are just more receptive to anything humorous you have to say.
Quick sidebar, Manny, who's your goat? Who's your goat comedian?
Oh, Bill Burr.
Okay.
I love Bill Burr. He's good. I like his no nonsense attitude. I like the way he can just riff and be authentic. And there's something charming about his anger and the way he delivers it. So yeah, definitely Bill Burr. He's probably the reason I got into comedy.
Hey there. We're taking a quick break from the show to let you know that if you'd like to invite Dhiren or Nikos to speak at your next event on topics ranging from emergence and the inner game to the future of AI, we've got you covered. Simply email us at info@emergencenowpod.com. Once again, that's info@emergencenowpod.com. Now, let's dive back to the show.
Charisma, I mean, is interesting, right? Because it feels like this invisible thing that makes people lean in, like when you talk. But I'm guessing in comedy, it's half, like you're saying, it's an asset, right? So are you saying you can take the most average joke and with enough charisma turn it into, a killer moment?
Absolutely.
So what does charisma look like for you as a comedian?
Sure.
Is it just delivery? Is it timing? What is it? Like, what makes one comedian really charismatic versus another maybe not as much?
So for me, charisma is your presence is delightful. You enhance the human experience, because when you show up, people just are happy, or they're relieved. Oh, thank God you're here. Oh, finally, somebody that can break the tension, or somebody that I can be comfortable around, someone that can put a smile on my face. And so I believe that's the effect of charisma in a nutshell. You're just a delightful person to have around. So how can you be delightful? Well, if you know how to share the fun or elicit the fun from people, that's a good way to do it. if you know how to be a good listener, I think is also a part of charisma. Like if you look at the people that are comedians that we can call charismatic, they're really good at asking questions. They're really good at listening. And they're naturally curious about you. So, if someone's on stage and they're asking, where are you from? That's your sister? Oh, it's her birthday. Oh, happy birthday, sister. All right. Yeah. And, whatever. And so they kind of have like this, I'm glad you're here too attitude. And in order to do that, I think the book, The Charisma Myth, mentioned one of the best ways to have charisma is to always have a positive outlook, find the fun in things, and just see the good in people. I think most of the times people are very untrustworthy of others, like from the get go. Like as soon as you see someone, people are like unconsciously looking for a reason not to like you, or there's something about you, or what am I think, yeah, like where's the bad side of you? Charismatic people, they don't care about that from the beginning. They want to see, like, I know you're a good person. Show me. Let's be good people together. And that's a really good way to find a charismatic angle when you meet someone, is you see the good in them. And when you see the good in them, they can tell that you can see that in them. And then it makes them want to be the good that you're listening from them. And then it makes the whole interaction great.
I love
Yeah,
everything about that. I would
Yeah.
just add two more dimensions to it. There's a sense of comfort and effortlessness in their delivery. Like you just get a
Ease.
sense that they're so comfortable in their own skin that it's not like manipulated, right? Like they're not trying too hard. There's just a sense of like ease. You're right, Dhiren.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, the most charismatic person I've ever met was my first manager, when at my first job when I graduated from college. And Manny, you're absolutely right. I mean, if there was one thing that really set him apart, was the sincerity in when he would ask a question, you could just feel that he was genuinely curious. Like he genuinely cared about, your perspective. So you felt seen, you felt heard. And another thing that he used to do, which I've picked up, is whenever he would call, the first thing he would say is, it's Rob, do you have 3 minutes? Do you have 5 minutes? Like he was preparing us, or preparing the other person on the line, for how long he needed. So he valued the other person's time, right? He cared. And yeah, it was all about just asking the right question, and just being really genuinely curious.
That's a good thing to add to the definition. Considerate is a good one.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Absolutely. So, Manny, for someone who's listening to this, by the way, I really loved everything you said, because it actually translates to just everyday life, right? So, a founder, an entrepreneur listening to this, or a parent that wants to just be more fun around their kids, right? You want to be more relatable. You want to be able to connect. Like these are life skills that, you can develop it, right? It's a muscle. You said something that was really interesting about bombing, right? So how does, like, everyone that, public speaking or pitching, like for an entrepreneur or a founder, is something that they have to get really good at, right? It's almost like it's like a rite of passage for most people, right? Especially for comedians, right? Uh, but then there's this element of, when things don't go the way you had planned, right? Or maybe even more extreme, you bomb. I mean, it's inevitable. It's like failure for startups. You're going to crash at some point, and burn at some point. What's the worst time that you bombed on stage, and how did you mentally recover from something like that?
The first time I went on stage, I bombed. It was bad. Oh boy, because I, like an idiot, instead of doing an open mic at a bar, where it's safe, where there's 5 people that don't even know who you are, I decided to do comedy at a bringer show at an actual comedy club, like a big 300 seater. comedy club, and it was such a silly move because you have to bring 10 people in order to go on stage. And so, there's 30 comedians that brought 10 people, so there's 300 people. And my 10 people were my father, my mother, my girlfriend at the time, her friends, and my family's friends. And then they sat them all in the front row, so they were in the front. And
Wow.
I never done comedy before, and I went up there, and I shouldn't have drank, but that if anyone's listening, aspiring comedian, like, do not drink and go on stage. It's not a good idea. I mean, I was just trying to fight my nerves, and I remember like the mic was wedged in, and I pulled the mic out of the mic stand and I hit my mouth with it, and there was like a thud, and it just spread out in the auditorium. And I can feel, for the first time ever, I can feel a room's energy where everybody just winces at the same time while I'm performing. And so it feels like a big black hole in the center of an audience. You're like, oh man, I'm going. Yeah, bombing is it's an awesome experience looking back, because it's humiliation. I mean, to feel humiliation is trippy, because it's almost like if you have a bad trip and then you go on the other side of that bad trip and become a good person or a better person because of how bad the trip was. It's something like that, where it was so humiliating and so ego shattering and so humbling. And it was just a big eye opener. Like, it just had like a outside body experience, that I kind of just realized that humiliation isn't real. You choose to feel humiliated, and that's what makes it intriguing too. Because if even nowadays, I don't bomb as much as I used to, but if you go up often, you're going to roll the dice, and eventually you're going to get snake eyes and bomb. And now the way I see it is, if this doesn't bother me and I had fun, it was actually a good thing. If you're up there having a rough time trying to entertain a crowd on an off night and it doesn't go well, but you were like making fun of that while you're up there, it's kind of heroic, at least in my personal way of defining it. It was like, I just did it. I just went up there. Yeah. And then people they see you after the show, and then you can show them that you're not bothered by what they perceive was supposed to be humiliating. They're just like, well, if you're not humiliated, why should I feel humiliated for you? And then it just slides right off. And what that does is it gives you like this strength to just endure it. Not think enduring is the right word. I think it's where you appreciate it more when a bomb happens. You're just up there. You're like, oh, I'm bombing. It's one of those nights. Let's see what I can learn as this is happening. What can I say? What comes to my mind? So rather than folding, like somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience in humiliation, instead of folding and it affecting your physiology or your body language, you kind of see it as a challenge. Like, okay, here it is. It's the moment where a better version of me can shine, and I can have fun through this weird moment. So yeah, it's more. You appreciate it more over the years when you have a rough set.
Yeah, you need like a ton of self-awareness. It's resilience and self-awareness.
That's the word I was looking for. Resilience.
Yeah. That's awesome, because like you need a level of self-awareness to not get eaten by the black hole, right? Because the black hole could essentially like suck you in, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm bombing. And then like other people just like rotate from that. And I can see you're the type of person to do that as well. And just, I'm just going to default to make fun of myself, where self-deprecation just really works in those situations. Where I'd like to kind of just take a quick sidebar with you is the craft, because I think the craft is very important here. People don't realize maybe the final product of what a performance is by the time it gets to that Netflix special, right? Like the jokes are tried and true and tested. And you sometimes see comedians kind of like in the first like V1 MVP days with like their script on stage, trying to test those things. What's been your process in kind of knowing when a joke is kind of like, all right, this is mature. I'm going to take this wherever I go. I have this in my back pocket. It's going to get the laugh. Here's the timing for it. That becomes what we call an algorithm in more or less words, right? There's kind of like a rule set that you're getting into. Other times that you're mentioning, you're like, I'm just going to be in the moment. I'm going to riff with the crowd a little bit. Oh, this guy is like totally like jiving with me. So let's maybe get the vibe of the room. So that's part of the craft, right? So like, talk to me about that process and how we can maybe incorporate that into our day to day, either as entrepreneurs or just people that want to get better at their craft.
So what comes to mind is like confidence, knowing that your ability to rise to the occasion, right? Like even if things get rough, I know I can handle it. I can do this, right? That feeling. So it's part that. And what gives you confidence in comedy? Knowing that you've been funny before, seeing similar patterns in how receptive people are when it comes to comedy. What makes a good comedian is really more of having the awareness of what's funny and having the confidence that you can relay that and say funny things based on either things you've done before or something that you can see as behavioral patterns in the world. So like if I did a show last night and it was someone's birthday, and I've done birthday shows before, and I just go in and, whose birthday is it? How old are you turning? Oh, it's already that time where you got to put 18 and 99 on the dating apps. And I got like some, pocketed jokes to like riff in there. There's that, the commonalities of scenarios. And then there's writing is a really big one. Like all comedians would say that one of the big factors of getting good is just writing, because what you're doing is you're training your brain to, either reflect on something that happened before that you can turn into something funny. Like, let's say a traumatic experience, you're able to turn that into funny. That's a really good workout. It's a great perspective shift. When you're hanging out with friends and someone says something funny and, in the present moment, and your brain can automatically pick up like, well, it's funny how you said that. And then that's another one. And then there's one like, looking into the future where you anticipate, oh, I got to go see that boss I don't like. What is it about him that I hate? Oh, I hate the way. And then you get into that mode. And so what you do is you build an awareness of funny angles, perspectives, observations. And then that helps you become funny, whether it's on stage or in everyday life. It's almost like you have just, like the RAS, or reticular activating system, that part in your brain. They talk about this sometimes. Like if all right, I want to buy a red car or a red Honda Civic. And as you're driving, as you're taking an Uber, as you're walking around, you're like, hey, there's the car I want. Hey, there's the car I want. Hey, there's the car I want. It's the same thing with comedy. Yeah. You just like, oh, look, a funny thing. Oh, that's hilarious. And then people watching, that's funny. Something someone said is funny. And so to do that, you just got to work out that muscle. And personally, the way I do it is I like showing my work. I don't see myself doing an hour special, because that's I think it's traditional. I don't really think the attention spans are there anymore. So I think it's better to like go at a bar, record a set, get a 30-second clip, and then do that in perpetuity. And then you've got 100-hour set if people go deep in your timeline enough. There's that. I like recording a podcast where, I ask myself a question about a particular topic, and then I just go off the top of my head and I try to find the funny, which helps me also be more spontaneous and creative on the fly. It's a good workout for me. I like then taking that and then turning it into a sketch. So a little more organized, a little more compact, when you turn like a 30-minute podcast into a 60-second sketch. And then maybe you can take it even further and turn that sketch into a one-liner to put on Threads or on X. And there's just so many angles to, take one funny idea and just extrapolate it into all these funny things. And then you build a timeline just full of that stuff. And then if anyone likes one particular thing, they can then enjoy the rest of it. And then that can be like your comedy special, your own timeline. That's the way I do it. That's how I write. That's how I get my creative muscles going.
Manny, how does it work so someone who's listening to the show says, you know what? Yeah, I want to nurture my humorous side. And they reach out to you and they say, okay, I want you to coach me to be, to be funny, to be more humorous. Like, what does that look like? What does that journey look like?
Most of my coaching clients always arrive because
are they aspiring comedians?
No, I thought
Okay.
it would be. And most comedians think that they don't need a coach. They just, which is fine. I mean, everyone goes through their own path. But most of the clients that look for comedy coaching in particular, they're either looking to get in touch with that side of them. They know it's there. And that's why when I communicate comedy coaching, I say, I help you find your sense of humor and create a lifestyle out of it, whether it's being good at making a friend or being good at dating or
Mm.
being good at public speaking or being good at networking or building a business or being funny online. That's a big one nowadays because people are trying to be authentic online. So it's mostly just regular people that just want to know or understand how they can be funny in a natural way, right? And I don't, like I said, I don't teach techniques. I just show you where it's already there, and then they go through the journey of discovering it, through
How do you do
interaction.
that? Could you speak to that? How do you do that?
You start off, like I mentioned, you label what makes you laugh. What is
Okay.
it about Jim Carrey that makes you laugh? What is it about Robin Williams that makes you laugh? What was your favorite movie about with them? Why was that movie their funniest work? And then they start labeling it. And so just the same way that you activate that part of their brain when you notice it, you can do the same with your humor. Oh, look, there's that thing that makes me smile. There's that thing that makes me laugh. And then you have a more robust understanding of your natural way of seeing the funny. And then with enough time, your brain then starts generating more detailed and humorous observations or behaviors because you're more in touch with that. You now know what it is rather than it being an impulse. All right, that's funny. Why was it funny? Elaborate. Oh, you're going to ruin the joke. I know, but this will be for next time. Right? They always say never dissect the joke because then it ruins the funny. Dissect it if you want to understand your humor. It's a personal thing. It doesn't have to be like, in public. Hey, everybody, I'm here to make you laugh, but let me tell you a joke and then ruin it by telling you why it's funny, right? No, you don't have to do that on stage or anything, but you can do it on your own. And then when you do it on your own, another process I do is what I call collect, connect, and select. So collect means you curate things that are funny, a funny book or a movie that you have saved on your Amazon Prime subscription or a funny meme that you saw on social media, you save that, or a YouTube video that made you laugh, or a podcast that had good interactions between these two comedians. You make a big collection of things that you find funny so that you can gain even more insights and perspectives on how your humor works. And then if you have this curated collection, what you then do is your brain starts making the connection between it all. Oh, I like Jim Carrey in that movie, and this podcast talks about this topic, and this one-liner is about this thing. Oh, I can kind of see the bigger picture of what makes me laugh. And it becomes like a personal discovery thing on your own in private. And then once you do this for a certain amount of time, however long it takes, when you go out in the world, because this part of you is activated, you can then select certain things or certain angles. Things just start showing up, and then you either point it out, or you have an outburst, or you make an observation, or whatever, and then it just starts naturally coming out of you because you're now selecting it from all the curation you've done before. The connections in your brain get a little bit better on what makes you laugh, and then to go even further, I'd say the first person you need to make laugh is yourself. If you know how
Nice.
to amuse yourself, you can then say it better when you say it out loud
I
to
love that.
people. So if you amuse yourself, it's funny. Even if
I
it's
love
not funny
that.
to them, you can go home and be like, that was kind of funny how I said it, and they didn't laugh. It's about making yourself laugh first, because
That's a
then
big one.
it's contagious, right?
Yeah.
That's more or less the process of coaching.
Yeah.
But of course, this takes time, and then there's obstacles, and then there's doubts, and all these things. And so you help them go through all the doubts, I guess, for them to get in touch with.
I love that last. I mean, I love everything that you said, especially the last part, because I think when you find yourself funny, or when you can entertain yourself, I think in a subtle way your confidence also goes up, right? You get funding. Your confidence gets funded by your perception of yourself being funny or not taking yourself too seriously. Yeah. So let's talk about AI. You spoke about generating, and it triggered a thought in my mind about how, I mean, everyone's talking about AI, right? We're leaning on it, we're leveraging it. Uh, AI is writing scripts, it's designing memes. You mentioned memes, and probably trying to replace. Is it trying to replace comedians? I mean, can humor? Uh, I mean, do you have to be human to be a comedian, to be humorous? Because comedy is really based on connection and nuance, right? What do you think? Can AI ever actually be funny, or is that one thing that humans will always own?
Well, I use AI as an extension of my humor because I've realized that if I ask AI to tell me something funny, it gives me the most generic knock knock dad joke. It's the worst. It's like the cringy kind, right? However, I find it fascinating that out of all the art forms that AI is supposedly taking over, humor is the one that it's really having a hard time with because, like I mentioned before, humor is very human. I mean, it takes all the complexities and nuances of the human experience to make it funny. And what's funny to humans is so unique. I think we're the only species that has laughter specifically for something that was said, right?
Yeah.
It's a very frontal lobe kind of thing to do amongst the humans. But what's interesting about AI when it comes to humor and comedy is that it can give you really good angles or perspectives. If you provided a good enough perspective, it'll then give you another perspective. And then when you combine the two, you can come up with something really funny. But you have to understand humor or how to explain a perspective in a humorous way for the AI to interact with you like that, because it sees where you are and it goes, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Let me add this to that. And then like, oh, that's good. I like that. But if you were to say, like, what's funny about attorneys? It'll give you like, well, how many attorneys does it take to screw up? Like something like that,
Yeah.
And the reason why is because it's an algorithm. There's no algorithm in comedy, outside of like things like, oh, the rule of three. But what is it that you say within the rule of three to make it funny, right? Or what's in the body language when you make something funny in the rule of threes? So what AI does is it's so linear with the language model that it's like input, output. Comedy doesn't work like that. Comedy's a little more convoluted. Comedy's a little more sloppy. Comedy's a little more like, gotcha kind of thing, right? And also it's very relationship oriented. The relationship with the comedian in the audience, or the relationship between you and your friend that you're laughing with. Things like that. And to put it into context, a really good story or an anecdote on AI trying to be humorous versus a human being humorous is in Jeopardy. There was an AI that was competing with two other contestants, and the AI was winning. And at the end for Final Jeopardy, one of the contestants, since they were going to win against this trivia bot, they're like, all right, what did you wager? And then he wrote, I welcome my cyborg overlords. And then he showed what he wagered. Everybody laughed. The audience laughed. The contestants laughed. Alec Trebek laughed. Guess who didn't laugh? The AI. He didn't get it. So that goes to show you through that anecdote how humor works with humans.
Mm.
That sounds like a data problem. And it's, you had mentioned, I'm going to connect the dots with something you mentioned earlier. When you're going through your coaching sessions and I wanted to learn how to be funnier, and to emulate your own style, you said it's a massive curation process, right? Like, talk to me about your favorite comedians, little bits, organize those into a folder. What's funny about those clips? What's funny about those interactions? And to me, that looks like if you curate that information well enough, there are some underlying characteristics that potentially the algorithm can maybe get to. It's not getting nuance yet. It's not drawing those connections yet. You're probably getting instances of when you put in a prompt and there's enough context there, it could write maybe at best like a first or a 1.5 version of a draft that you can work with, right? Which is why I really connect with the fact that it's indeed an extension of yourself. You're like, yeah, this is not good to go, but it's good enough to get me through the blank page and I could actually iterate off of this. So there's something interesting there. I think eventually the AI will get to those nuances. It's just a lack of data right now. It's not getting the overlord jokes, even though I'd say the new model is starting to have a little bit more understanding with those things and nuance, but it's getting there in a scary and accelerating way.
Yeah.
Well,
As
two
you can
things.
tell, Nikos, he's the ambassador for AI. He's like the representative. Whenever there's,
Yeah.
whenever AI needs representation, Nikos is there.
Well, there's two things to consider. So the first one is, if we can perceive AI as human, and I think of like a robotic humanoid mannequin model that has the right delivery. Let's say things like timing or tonality, and we can perceive it as human and forget for a moment that it's AI. We can take what they say as funnier because it gives us the illusion, right? So that there's that. Like the more human it is, and the way it relays the joke could make it funny in the future once we get that figured out. And the second thing would be to touch on this is, where does it emulate the humor from? Where does it get the data points? Because there's obviously different comedy styles, but is it programmed to be a satirical, observational, slapstick? So then it has to emulate something in order for it to be funny. So, but who is it emulating from? Because it has to be human, right? Yeah. There's this account I follow, and Nikos, you might know it since you're into AI. GP Tars. Have you seen this little miniature robot of that robot from what's that movie, Interstellar? I think that's a really good. I love the way that in the end it's like, all right, sense of humor, 10%.
Yeah, dial it back. Yeah.
Yeah, dial it back. So I think, it'll get there. I think it'll get there, but it has to be human, or at least emulate humanity to the point where we can't make a distinction anymore. I think that's the only way we can see humor come out of AI.
Yeah. And that goes back to the contextual awareness, right? Like how aware is this robot? Or like you could explicitly tell, like Dhiren, I sent you that example where you could now point this AI to your website and it'll create an entire podcast of that website. And you could tell like the tonality is a little bit off, the pronunciation, you could definitely tell it's an AI, but you're absolutely right. We're close to it passing the Turing test, which is you're not going to be able to tell whether or not that's a human or a robot on the other side. But it's like, okay, is it emulating all of those things? Are you getting all of the right cues? And like you had mentioned, the new language model is, okay, ingest every single comedian's sketches since the beginning of time, movies, stand-up comedy, jokes, like you name it, create an LLM for that. And eventually it'll start to understand kind of those little pickups, those little nuances. And you might even notice it in ChatGPT right now too. It's saying a little bit more. So they are trying to mimic humanity. So there's expressed intentionality in getting AIs to be a little bit more human. So yeah, we're kind of in new territory here, which is super interesting.
Hey man, if I can program a robot to go on tour for me, and I'm just here, like, the material, I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah.
That's very productive.
Yeah, you know that audio clip that you sent me of the podcast, Nikos? Like,
yeah,
you're right. I mean, you can tell if you're actually looking out for it. But if you're just listening to it, you can't tell.
Yeah.
Like, I sent it to my dad. He could not tell. Yeah. I was like, what do you think about this? He's like, it's a great episode. I didn't know Nikos was working on this project. I was like, yeah, but what else? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, what else did you notice? He's like, no, that's it. And then I told him, it just blew his mind.
That's amazing.
I'm going to send
that's
this
your
to
dad,
you,
though. Yeah. Send it to Arhan. You'll get a totally different vibe, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll ask you. That's actually interesting. Manny, I'm interested in learning more about how the coaching works.
Sure. So, like I mentioned, when it comes to comedy coaching, it's just my ability of helping you find the funny naturally that you have and just pointing you in the direction so that when you go over there and you start exploring, you figure it out. I think one of the best signs of a good coach is where the client feels like they did it on their own.
Mm.
The coach was never there. They just pointed in a direction. They're like, all right, I'm going to go in that direction. And then when they're there, they're like, I did it. Not we did it. I did it. So I love that feeling of being a comedy coach. And one of the ways to show that they're in touch with their sense of humor, at least the fastest way or the most effective way, is to do it on a virtual stage, which is creating funny content. And you can apply comedy into anything online, which is great. Add a little personality, take a different angle than your competitors if you're in business, standing out with a funny caption. You know, you're on vacation in France and you, instead of saying, you know, something like, oh, vacation time or something, you say something funny like, wish you were here only if you paid for dinner, you know, whatever. Funny things like that can spark a little bit of, I guess, charisma on social media. And it helps you stand out. It helps you show people that you've got personality and that you're a charismatic person, and it'll open opportunities for you if you're funny online. That's one thing that I find fascinating. The social opportunities, the business opportunities, the dating opportunities, people just can give you that just by seeing how entertaining you are in creating content. So I've coached people on how to create comedy content, but I've never done a group coaching call when it comes to it. And all I do is comedy content. I love the virtual stage. It's the most effective way to be funny. So I'm starting this group coaching call every Sunday from October 13th until the end of the year. So you can experiment to see what a group coaching call would look like in helping lots of people get in touch with their virtual voice of being funny. And, you know, there's endless ways to be funny online. So I want to hear feedback. I want to see what people want, what they're worried about. And one of the things that I understand they're worried about is like, well, what if I create something and I don't get any likes? Or if someone says I'm not funny in the comments, and it's the same thing as trying to do stand-up, but it's actually safer because you can delete the comment.
Yeah.
You can't tell everybody stop booing. People are going to boo. So being funny online is just effective. And, you know, developing a virtual voice is totally different than developing a voice on stage, but it can translate because if you know what's funny virtually, you can take your time. You can write something out, do it in slow motion. You can act it out if it's a sketch. You can edit the wording, the play on words on the caption. So since there's so many angles and there's so many opportunities waiting for someone, if they're funny, I'm going to start doing this group coaching call. It's free. And if anyone out there listening wants to participate, it's 3 p.m. EST, Eastern Time. And all you got to do is just visit mannygaravito.com and you'll see all the info there to get in contact.
Amazing. And we'll put that in the show notes. How do people find you?
Yeah, just go to the website, mannygaravito.com, Garavito. Or you can send me an email, manny@mannygaravito.com.
Okay, I follow you, and your content on Instagram is hilarious. So I highly recommend you guys follow Manny. Manny, what's your handle?
So my comedy page is at Miami Comedy. It's very niche for the city. I mean, as a businessman in comedy, I realized you got to find your niche on what you're making fun of. So I decided the city. And my coaching is at Manny Garavito.
All right, there you go. We'll put that in the show notes. Man, this has been awesome. You know, I love that you've turned comedy into this blend of education, therapy, and entertainment, right? All of that while running a business. Thank you for sharing your journey with us today, and can't wait to see what you do next and have you back on the show at some point. Thanks,
absolutely. Manny. Anytime. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you for tuning in to Emergence Now.
where we explore the emerging trends, technologies, and ideas that are shaping our world today for you to discover yourself. We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights that you can apply in your own life. If you want to stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media, where we share additional content, engage with our community, and keep the conversation going. Thanks again for listening to Emergence Now, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode.